Britain's finest unit for forensic investigation is embarking on a new and groundbreaking mission. As experts in human identification, they use the full arsenal of modern technology. But now, for the first time, they're applying these skills to bodies from the long, distant past.
It's very exciting for us to be able to take the skills that we use on a daily basis and apply them to look at historical skeletons to see just how far we can go.
Forensic anthropology, facial reconstruction, and painstaking research will open new windows on history as dramatic personal stories emerge from long forgotten bones.
Historical research is allowing me to investigate people's experiences at different times throughout history.
Probably a little boy, somewhere around about 8. And I have to say, I've never seen anything like it before.
So we've got the face, the facial reconstruction, and we've added some textures.
Fantastic. That is just superb.
This time, the team hunts for the identity of a mysterious skeleton unearthed at Stirling Castle.
He certainly had a nasty crack to the top of his head.
His body reveals new information about one of the bloodiest periods in our history.
It's just horrendous. That must have been so painful.
When the Scottish and the English were engaged in total war. The forensic trail leads to an extraordinary document.
It could be our man. Yes. Ooh, okay.
Can the team give one of history's cold cases a home, a face, a name? This is History Cold Case. Stirling Castle. Perched on an extinct volcano and strategically placed near the gateway to the Highlands, was for centuries the front line during the Scottish Wars of Independence. Perhaps this offers us our first clue to unlocking a mystery that has remained unsolved for 6 centuries. During 1997, archaeologists excavated a group of skeletons that had lain in a forgotten room underneath the castle for over 600 years. A find made more unusual and rare as it wasn't common practice to bury people within the walls of the castle. One of these bodies, a powerful man in the prime of his life, has unusual wounds to his skull. Now, the History Cold Case team will collaborate with Historic Scotland, the keeper of the skeletons, to open an investigation into who the man was and why he was there. Could his story shed new light into Stirling's turbulent history? Dr. Xanthi Mallet from the Centre of Anatomy and Human Identification is coming to collect the skeletons and meet Historic Scotland's chief archaeologist, Peter Yeoman.
So this is our archaeology store where we keep all the finds from all the excavations that we've been involved with over the last 40 years. And all the Stirling material that we're looking at is just these.
Okay. So some of it's quite fragmented then?
Yeah, it's not in bad condition, but there's obviously lots of little bits.
Yeah.
But also I've got another thing to show you as well, a fascinating object that was found with the young man. It's an arrowhead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not much is known about the arrow or the bones, originally dated as 14th or 15th century. It's time for the cold case team to get to work.
It's fantastic, yeah. I think the team are going to be really excited to have a look at these and see where we want to go next with it and what we can find out. There's certainly lots of different forensic techniques we're going to be able to apply. So it's going to be really exciting.
Open up and lay them out.
The investigation will be led by forensic anthropologist Professor Sue Black, based at the Centre for Anatomy and Human Identification, part of the University of Dundee. The case starts with an observation of the bones.
thoracic. Sacrum in pieces. Okay, that gives us an H clue.
And she's already spotted something highly unusual.
Don't know that you've seen what sits on the top of the skull? Ooh!
Ooh, what do you think that is?
Well,
Axe.
If you can see on the frontal bone here, which is just coming down the side of the forehead, there's a very deep groove. And that groove shows that the outer table, because the bones of the skull act like a sandwich. So there's an outer layer of bone, an inner layer of bone, and a bit of filling in the middle. And what's happened is that there's been damage to the outer layer, but it's not penetrated through to the inner layer. So we've not gone in and damaged brain or blood vessels or anything like that. But he's certainly had a nasty crack to the top of his head. But it's healed, so this happened long before he died.
The bones reveal that our man was between 25 and 40 years old. And there are more signs of trauma, this time to his face.
Those teeth have had a rattle at some point or another. They've set up abscesses in there.
Yeah.
There's going to be some form of an impact. Not enough to have broken a face, for example, but you get a smack in the front of your face, then both of these teeth are going to rattle. And that's what's happened. It's loosened the teeth enough that what happens is the bacteria can get into the space that it can't normally get into and sets up an infection, which is what you have in terms of the abscess.
But although he was clearly a victim of violence, he was well equipped to dole it out as well.
But Soleus is quite well developed. So I think muscle-wise, he's got good sites of muscle development lower limb, but they're exceptional upper limb.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a big bruiser in that regard. When you look at the back of the scapula, the shoulder blade, you can see that there's a trough runs down there. That's because this bone is about surface area. That's about muscles attaching. And if you've got a bigger muscle, you need more surface area. So what you do is you undulate the bone and you give the bone more surface area. And look at that trough. There's just a huge dip going in there. And I don't know that I've actually ever seen it this extensive. He's a big bruiser.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
He's got his story. We just started to unravel it. I always say it's like a knitted jumper, that somewhere you've got to start and find a thread. If you can just keep going, you can unravel the whole thing.
Sue gathers the other experts who will work with her and Xanthi on the investigation.
We're going to start, first of all, with what we need to find out about him historically.
Okay,
And
so
his place
historical
of
context.
burial, the context of it.
For his bones to show signs of such big muscle development means whatever this man did for a living, he had done from a very young age. So explaining his physique will be crucial. They also need to narrow down possible dates for our man's death. And Dr. Caroline Wilkinson will painstakingly reconstruct his face.
We can scan skull, try and put it back together. We could also do a reconstruction of his upper body in relation to his head as well.
Okay.
We've done it before.
Dr. Wolfram Meyer-Orgenstein will try to discover more about where our man lived and died from chemical signatures in his bones.
I'd like to have a mid-shaft diaphysis.
Mid-shaft diaphysis, femur. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the hard science begins. Bone analysis to find out what our man ate and where he was from. Bone scanning to begin the process of facial reconstruction. They also need to discover the significance of a tantalizing artifact found with the body, a single arrowhead.
His life was clearly interesting because he's got a number of incidents that have clearly happened to him throughout his life. He's got an intriguing period that says, how did he die? Was this arrowhead that's found in association with him part of the death? And then what's happened to him afterwards is also interesting. So that why was he buried where he was? Was that an indication of his status? So he's one of those individuals where all three parts of that process are going to tell you something interesting and something different. Who was he in life? How did he die? Why was he treated the way he was?
Xanthi's job is to try and add to the profile of our man through historical research. First step, back to the place where his body was found. Archaeologist Gordon Hewitt has been fascinated by the Stirling man ever since he discovered him here in 1997. The castle itself could provide crucial clues. The trail begins in Stirling's Great Hall, built for James IV in around 1503.
And this is the Great Hall.
Wow.
Stirling Castle.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's massive.
Yeah, it is.
At the front line of repeated English invasions in the 13th and 14th centuries, Stirling Castle changed hands many times during the sieges and battles of the Scottish Wars of Independence.
Many sort of festivities, and as well as the works of government were reenacted here. And these tapestries are give an indication anyway of the kind of lavish quality of the court.
Would they have had tapestries and things hanging on the walls?
I think so, very much so.
Underneath the rooms of the 18th century kitchens, Gordon found the remains of a long-forgotten building.
And here we are in one of the rooms of the governor's kitchen.
He thinks this area could be the remains of what was once a medieval chapel.
This is the area where the actual mature male was buried. When you actually look at the photographs, which I can show you.
Oh, fantastic. You can see the injury on the skull
That's
there.
right, that's right.
Why would he have been buried here?
In normal circumstances, a burial would be completed preferably at the parish church from whence they came. They would only have been buried here in exceptional circumstances.
Yeah.
But our cold case wasn't alone. 10 other bodies, including a female, were unearthed at the same site.
It's hard to imagine your average man-at-arms or
Okay.
household servant being
So they wouldn't
interred
have been
here.
just anyone. To
No.
be buried in here, they would
No.
have had to have been of relative significance to
I think that's fair to say.
the family.
That's right.
Okay.
To be buried in a chapel inside Stirling Castle, our man must have been of high status. Taken along with his physique, could he have been part of an elite fighting force? Warfare medieval style was led by knights on horseback, the elite warrior class of Europe. Knighthood wasn't just conferred by the monarch, it had to be earned on the battlefield. Knights lived and died by the shared values of the chivalric code: courage, piety, and loyalty to your king. In Dundee, the team is taking samples of teeth and bone from the skeleton. One goes for carbon dating, and another goes to Dr. Wolfram Meyer-Orgenstein, the team's stable isotope expert. These are ancient remains, so there are no guarantees, but Sue is confident.
There is nobody else that I would trust for a forensic investigation. He is the best that there is, and he has not only a national reputation, he has a huge international reputation.
Wolfram will be hunting for trace minerals in the molar tooth, which is formed in the first 15 years of life. These could reveal where he spent his early years, and samples from the thigh bone, which regenerates during a lifetime, could tell us about his diet as an adult. Next, to the local Ninewells Hospital for a CT scan to see inside the man's bones. The scan might yield valuable information about his life and death. It will also provide the accurate data needed to reconstruct his face and body. Caroline Wilkinson has drafted in her colleague, Caroline Needham, to produce a full-body reconstruction of the man. To begin, they examine the skull.
At the moment, I'm just assessing the skull to see how much of it is here, how much of it we're going to have to reassemble, and when we've done that, how much will be missing still that we can remodel. Actually, it looks like there's quite a lot here. There's more than it looked like on the images because we've got a lot of fragments. And messy as that looks, we can actually manage to put most of them back together. We can reassemble the skull in the computer, so we can take scan data from this skull and import each fragment into the computer and then reassemble it. I mean, the beauty of the computer is there's no gravity, so you can put a skull piece there and it'll stay, it doesn't fall. We can tell by looking at this jaw, this is a big, strong, hefty jaw. It's got very strong muscle attachments here, so he would have had a big, square jaw. Heavy-duty face, lower half of the face. But then we've also got quite strong brow ridges at the top, so he's going to have a heavy brow, more deep-set eyes. I mean, it's very typically male skull. Oh, I love skulls like this, not spits. It's my favourite thing, reassembling them.
Each of the fragments has to be individually and painstakingly scanned using a small mobile scanner. With the hospital CT scan, these measurements will make a complete skull. The face that Caroline foresees seems to fit perfectly with Sue's assessment of the body. Heavy-browed, muscly, square-jawed, a man perfectly formed to live and die by the sword. The first test results are coming in from the labs. Radiocarbon dating is the key dating test for bone. One type of carbon, carbon-14, deteriorates at a constant rate once it is laid down in the bone. Measuring the amount of decay establishes the age of the skeleton. It's a difficult process that isn't always successful, but this time, the team have a clear result. The Stirling cold case died between 1290 and 1400. That means he lived during the height of the Scottish Wars of Independence, when the English were repeatedly trying to conquer the country and the Scots were driving them back. From Stirling Castle, perched on a steep cliff, Scottish armies could survey the fields below. 10 miles north of here, the powerful River Forth marks the beginning of the Highlands, so the castle and the open fields around it saw the bloodiest conflicts. Xanthi is meeting medieval warfare expert Scott McMaster.
This is a picture of his crania. Now you can quite clearly see there, that's a healed sharp force trauma to...
Yeah, absolutely, at the back of the head.
Yeah, I mean, is that kind of wound you'd recognise?
It's very common in the medieval period. This could be an axe or a sword, perhaps, or even a club. He's obviously perhaps been a knight or a man-at-arms, anyway, judging by the weaponry.
Very robust in his upper body, especially, very robust.
Right, OK. Well, it's quite common for sort of bruisers, so to speak, in this period.
Yeah, that's how I kind of imagined him.
The Scots, sometimes supported by the French, managed to defeat the invading English army on a number of occasions. But the victories of William Wallace and Robert the Bruce weren't enough to keep them permanently at bay. Stirling Castle was occupied by English forces at least 8 times during our man's lifetime.
The castle certainly changed hands over this period and several times.
Right.
So whether he was, this individual in particular was maybe perhaps involved in a siege, or if he was actually, he died later on of wounds perhaps during one of these battles, it's a very strong possibility.
It's not clear yet which side our man was on. English, Scottish, or even French. But he was definitely part of the conflict. But what about the other bodies found with him? Can they shed any light onto the investigation? Sue and Xanthi are about to examine one of them. The only woman found among the bodies, she too has mysterious wounds on her head.
Okay, so... What are these? Two of them. You got one there and you got one there.
Yeah.
You've got...
That is approximately the same shape as that there.
Who's that? What on earth are they? Bloody hell. They're very square. That is incredibly clean to go through there. So that whatever it was a significant amount of force with a sharp edge.
Yeah, otherwise it would have shattered.
Otherwise it would have shattered. So I think you need to find someone who knows something about this, because I know absolutely nothing.
No, not me.
It doesn't make sense.
Sue and Xanthi have no idea what the two puncture marks in the skull could mean. But Dr. Joe Buckbury, a biological anthropologist from Bradford University, is an expert in skull trauma.
What's really interesting is a rectangular hole penetrating through the skull. The edges are quite clear. There's a little area in here that's just sort of spalling away, which could have been caused by a weapon coming out. And then on the inside, what you might be able to see is that the hole is actually much larger on the inside. That's called internal beveling, and that's a really strong indication that this happened around the time of death. So I immediately thought this was quite interesting and could well be battle trauma. But I think there was also some more trauma to the side of her head in here. If I take these pieces of bone, they actually fit quite tightly. And I think there's been another blow around the time of death in here with a radiating fracture from the force of the blow coming up around here. I wonder whether or not she was hit on the side of the head with quite a blunt object, fell to the ground, and then after that the two square injuries were sustained on the top of her head.
Joe thinks she knows the kind of weapon that killed the Stirling woman.
Well, the weapon I'm holding now is a 16th century flanged mace that a member of staff at the Royal Armouries has given me because it's got quite a rectangular cross-section which might possibly match the injury we're seeing on this skull.
Joe demonstrates that the marks on a florist sponge made by the mace are identical to those on the woman's skull. Were the wars of Scottish independence so overwhelming that women were caught up in the conflict as well? Xanthi has come to Dunbar on the east coast of Scotland, near the remains of the town's medieval castle. She's meeting historian Chris Brown. He's not surprised by the wounds in the woman's skull.
So this is the woman I've come to talk to you about today. And these are the injuries to her skull. What we're looking at here is the back of her crania, so the back of her head. And you've got two distinct injuries here. So are these the kind of injuries you'd expect to see in battle, and if so, on a woman?
Absolutely, totally typical injuries.
Really?
Exactly the sort of wound you'd expect to get, and no reason to assume that women are in any way completely isolated from war in the Middle Ages.
Here at Dunbar in the 14th century, the Countess of Moray defeated a violent English attack. Black Agnes, as she's known, was a fearless defender of her castle.
This is probably the clearest and finest example of a woman engaged in war in Scotland in the Middle Ages. The woman in question is called Agnes of Dunbar, or Black Agnes, and she commanded a siege here for 5 months.
Oh, really?
19 weeks, solid
Here, in this castle?
right where we are. She was in her mid-20s, about 25, 26
Really?
years old. Her husband wasn't present, the Earl of Dunbar. He's busy fighting the English in other parts of Scotland, and the castle comes under siege. She's on site, of course she's in charge.
Black Agnes's battle was just one in the long and bloody war. It seems that Scottish men and women took up arms and died to defend the cause of their independence. But was our Stirling cold case friend or foe? Did he defend the castle, or did he attack it? Can his bones yield any more clues? Sue and Xanthi take a closer look at the skeleton.
What else have we got? Oh, we definitely got problems on his left ankle. If you look on the talus, heel sits like that, talus sits on top. If you look at the talus, there's a very well-defined area of damage. So that would have been filled with possibly pus.
Yep.
But certainly enough space-occupying tissue to cause bone damage. It will have not been pleasant to walk on because the entirety of your body weight passes down through that ankle joint. That's painful.
But the injuries don't stop there.
There are some vertebrae that are a little bit unusual, but I don't think those are normal aging changes. I think those are trauma and path changes. And if you open that one and look at it, can you see that ridge that runs around there? That's not normal.
No, so he's had some sort of trauma, something's happened to...
Yeah. Episodes of damage have occurred, whether that's as a result of activity. It's not a systemic disease because that's not something that's being evident throughout this.
Yeah.
But there's localized and little focal areas where bone is damaged, broken down, showing it's trying to repair itself. Not fracture necessarily.
So, back trauma and an abscess on his ankle. When you put these injuries together with his physique, what are they telling us?
When you've got somebody who is obviously very well developed, like he is, but not symmetrically so in the top and the bottom half of his body. So he's doing something different with the bottom half of his body compared to what he's doing with the top half of his body. So if, for example, the obvious thing would be, if we think he was a knight, for example, is he sitting on a horse? And I think, quite justifiably, that would be something that we could look at.
As the historical research and the science start to converge, a clear profile is emerging of a strong man somewhere between 25 and 40, a survivor of heavy blows to the head, of sufficient rank to be buried within the walls of Stirling Castle. But Sue needs more historical research to tie up the evidence. She wants to prove he was a knight, a member of the military elite of medieval Europe. The rituals of medieval knighthood weren't buried with them. Jousting tournaments, lavish displays of might, wealth and skill were almost as dangerous as the battlefield. Xanthi is meeting David Mitchell and Jeremy Richardson of the Knights of Royal England, who are keeping these rituals alive.
Right, this is a chainmail top. Okay, we won't ask you to put it on. I don't know how you want to, if you want to put your arm out a little bit.
Right. Oh, bloody hell. This is really heavy, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, of course, at that time, there would have been very little armour around, so all your protection really would have come from the chainmail.
Right.
Let me give you a helmet.
Right.
A metal helmet. This is actually a tilting helmet.
That's pretty heavy as well.
It's metal. It's really going to it'll take a blow to the face.
Yeah. So this is going to build up all the muscles down your neck, across your shoulders.
Yeah. That he would have been training with armour and chainmail since he was sort of 14, 14,
really?
15.
So even as his muscles and bones were developing, he would have been carrying this kind of weight. So
Well, try the helmet on. Just see what your vision's like in the helmet.
I've got a guess that it's not going to be very good. Okay.
It's not the best, but it will protect you.
Okay, I can't see anything, really.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
Yeah,
we
funny
can't hear
that. I can't even see.
Right, weapons. Jousting shield, so you would wear that on your left arm, and then we've got a lance
Oh, you
for
are
you.
kidding. Right, okay.
Mind you don't bang him on the head.
Yeah.
Right, and that lance would cross over the other side of the horse, so you try and attack your opponent, you try and have your opponent coming, on this side, side of you, because you've got your shield on that side, so that will be the protection.
I don't think I'd have been very good at this. Okay, right.
Let me take the lance from you. I'll take the lance and the shield.
Thank you.
The sheer weight of armour and weapons designed to be used on horseback explains the muscle imbalance between the upper and lower torso. But can our jousters explain the mouth, ankle and back injuries?
He would have had trouble walking, that and been in some discomfort. How he developed that, I don't know, but it was showing in both the ankle bones and the lower leg bones.
Well, presumably, having done it, presumably that would be a fall, a horse going down. If your foot stays in the stirrup, the actual stirrup itself damages your ankle.
OK, the other injuries that he had, he'd had a knock to the front of his mouth here, so his teeth were loose. Yeah, you're nodding here. Had that?
We've done that once.
Yeah, OK.
I would probably,
Jousting, yeah.
said a lance in the face. And the back injury is sort of an interesting one. I guess it could have been a fall. There could have been something that happened with the fall, but also excessive riding does your back in.
Yeah, so all of these injuries are consistent with him being a horse rider and also a knight in jousting and taking part in these types of events. He is more robust in the right-hand side, so that may be a result of the jousting and the sword play. Everything active and kind of overt is with the right-hand side. Defensively, he's well built on the left-hand side because he's got the shield. So it all fits with the profile that we've got, and I'm happy now to think that he is a knight on horseback.
Back in Dundee, Sue summons the team.
Wolfram, you've got some new dietary information.
The first results of Wolfram's isotopic testing have come through, with surprising results. It looks like our cold case wasn't the meat-eating carnivore that we might expect from a medieval warrior.
We looked at the bone. We found 30% marine-derived protein intake or food intake and 70% terrestrial.
He's eating a lot of saltwater fish, a much higher proportion than we eat today, and yet Stirling Castle is miles from the sea.
For God's sake, the man's in Stirling. It's not on a coastline.
Has nothing to do with coast. Has nothing to do with.
But was he eating fish then?
Because
it's Stirling.
No, I mean Stirling is not so far away from the Forth.
It's not, but it's still
and it's
enough
not,
of a distance. It's not something you necessarily expect fish to be a major part.
Yeah, but I mean, you find
fish
influence in English diet and in near coastal regions.
Okay, I think we need to go and look at that. Okay. It's kind of ridiculous, to my mind, in that we're getting an isotope signature that's saying there's a high proportion of marine fish. Stirling isn't on the coast. You know, I might expect freshwater fish because, you know, there are rivers around there and some very pretty ones too. But it's not exactly a coastal community. It's not Aberdeen.
The forensic evidence and the historical research indicate the Stirling cold case was a warrior on horseback, a knight. But Wolfram's isotope data says that he ate a lot of saltwater fish. Xanthi is now following a lead that could just explain the link between these two seemingly unrelated facts. In Southampton, one of Britain's most important ports in the Middle Ages, Xanthi is meeting food historian Professor Chris Woolgar.
Hello, Nick.
Hi, Chris.
And Mrs. Xanthi.
Hi, Xanthi. Nice to meet you.
Hello, lovely to meet
He's treating Xanthi to a tasting menu of authentic medieval fish dishes.
Were they preserving these dishes, these fish, for eating all year round?
Yes, it's very important to them to have food that preserves well. And in fact, much of the staple fish is preserved, and it comes particularly as wind-dried cod or salted cod. We have records of boats coming into Hull in the 1380s, 1390s, with as many as 96,000 preserved fish on board.
It seems that dried or salted fish was a huge industry that fed a fast-growing coastal and inland population.
This is dried cod that we saw earlier.
This is dried cod with medieval sweet and sour sauce.
That's quite nice, actually, isn't it?
I don't expect it not to be nice, but, you know.
But fish wasn't just food for the body. There's another reason why a medieval knight might favour fish over meat.
So 30% fish sounds like an awful lot to me. Is that a kind of common component of a medieval diet?
Interestingly, it often links to their conception of religious virtue. Fish is most like the food that men will eat in paradise.
Oh.
And the reason is that it is a way of avoiding carnality and meat and the corruption that comes from it. It leads people into lust and to gluttony and into sin.
And there's one final clue.
Preserved fish like this was a very good way of provisioning armies.
Yeah.
And when we see the calculations that the English Exchequer made for provisioning its armies going to Scotland, we can see that fish forms, I guess, probably well over a third of the diet that's there.
As much as that?
Yes.
So a high fish diet tells us that our man was eating the standard food of the army, and it was also the diet expected of a pious Christian knight. This fits perfectly into the growing profile of our sterling warrior. Back in Dundee, Caroline Needham is showing her colleague Caroline Wilkinson how the face of the sterling knight is developing.
So I've added the pegs.
The pegs indicate the depth of the tissue they are about to position on the face, now that they have reassembled the skull in the computer.
Areas where we've had to rebuild with the different fragments, put them together, there's always a bit more room for error there. But I think because we've had most of the skull, it shouldn't be too far out. I can show you the muscles that I've started to add. Okay. I've got a neck for him if you want to take a look. So this is from a laser scan of somebody, and I've adapted it to fit this skull.
Well, that's quite a beefy neck, but it looks like it's in the correct position from these mastoid processes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's getting to look more beefy by the minute.
He is.
He's got a big square face at the moment.
Very, especially the lower face and the jaw, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a nose to add to the measurements, and then it's just skin and ears.
Yeah. So if I just get rid of the plane and put the skin back to normal, we can have a good look at what he looks like.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Excellent.
Looks like a rugby player. I think he's got quite a nice face, though. He doesn't look...
At rest, I think he looks perfectly pleasant.
Yeah, and I think because
on a battlefield,
that'd be a different
story.
That's true. He's got this interesting gap between his teeth as well, which is quite endearing, I think.
And his ears stick out a bit.
That's true.
The next step is to work on the full body reconstruction to show how beefy he really was. Then the reconstruction will be almost complete. But there is one more critical line of inquiry. What caused our knight's death? His grave provided the biggest clue. An arrowhead was found mixed with his bones. But would a single arrowhead have been lethal enough to kill such a powerfully built man? Xanthi has come to the Royal Armouries in Leeds. She's meeting Graham Reimer, medieval weapons expert. He recognises the type of arrowhead found in our man. It was designed to cause maximum damage to flesh.
This is the nature of arrowhead that will be used in both hunting and warfare. It's a fairly grim process, but archery is done usually through hemorrhage. The arrowhead, the blades, as it were, these long barbs extending backwards from the main head, were sharp all the way down. So as the arrowhead penetrated, it would do a lot of cutting as it went in.
So there's going to be a lot of bleeding associated.
Well, that's how it works. And the barbs are there to prevent the arrowhead coming out.
He wants to show Xanthi a similar, better preserved arrowhead. It becomes clear how this lethal weapon could have brought our man down.
Okay. Ooh.
Well, here's a draw of some of our medieval arrowheads. Yeah, this is the most similar that we have easily available with the long barbs.
Oh,
This is
okay.
how it would have fitted on. You see.
And that looks quite big to me. Is that quite a large?
This is a pretty accurate reconstruction of a
Is it?
typical medieval military arrow.
An X-ray confirms that the arrowhead found with our man had a very similar barbed head.
There are medical treatises in the Middle Ages which explain how you may remove arrowheads of different designs, and the barbed head really can only come out by keeping going with the direction in which it went into the body. So essentially you had to push it right the way through. There was no easy way of extracting it, and simply the process of trying to extract it could cause fatal injury anyway. So it's a very effective weapon in that sense, and a very nasty thing to be shot by. If it wasn't more or less instantly fatal, it would certainly prove so in a relatively short period of time.
The type of arrowhead found with our man was designed to cause maximum damage and to be difficult to remove. Up until the 13th century, the knight on horseback had ruled on the battlefield, but the rise of the archer, cheap but effective, was one of the turning points in the history of warfare. Back in Dundee, Wolfram has some more surprises. The results of his isotope tests on the knight's back tooth reveal where he grew up. Are we about to find out if he was English or Scottish?
Can you take us through what you've found about our gentleman from Stirling Castle?
What we have found so far from the two molars we had in our lab, that during that period, let's say generally 8 years to 15 years of age, that this person has definitely not lived in Scotland.
Ooh, ooh. Okay.
Between the ages of 8 and 15, the knight was growing up in either southern England or western France, geographically close but politically very different.
Adding to what you just, the rather big bombshell that you just dropped, if you were to geographically come down the UK, so we're happy it's not in Scotland, how far down that UK can you get?
You would have to go down far south to the home counties.
Okay.
So Sussex, Devon.
So you have to be in the real
You really
south.
have to be. You have to be close to the channel in essence.
And that's a very sort of specific geographical area. When we then say France, do we mean the entirety of France?
No, not.
Or is there a part of France that equates
basically
more?
Let's say it. Unfortunately, the France, as far as our maps and our understanding at the moment goes, we can sort of split into two parts, and you would say this signature is closer to the west coast.
He's not Scottish, but is he a French ally or an English enemy?
I think our natural inclination was that this was going to be a Scottish knight. So a very important turning point in this entire investigation has been Wolfram's stable isotope information. That has really changed the pattern of who we think this person may have been. So we've got to now sort of come away from the Scottish concept that, you know, is embedded in the Scottish knight. We all think of him as being Sean Connery, don't we? But he's not Scottish, not by what we've seen today. And he could be English, but no, we don't want him to be English. We're in Scotland here, we'd quite like him to be French.
Xanthi has come to Edinburgh Castle to meet Dr. Katie Stevenson, a medieval historian. She might be able to shed some light on whether our knight was part of the French troops sent to support the Scottish against the English.
So was there a presence, a French presence, in Stirling in the 14th century?
In Scotland, most definitely. There's obviously quite a lot of diplomacy surrounding the Old Alliance, which is taking place. The Old Alliance, very simply, is an ongoing and renewable treaty between the Scots and the French that and it's basically to do with England. If England invades Scotland, the French will come to the Scots' aid. If England invades France, the Scots will go to the French aid. So it's about providing military support to each other on the borders of
Against
England.
the English?
Yeah.
Nice.
There is also evidence that there were French forces in Scotland in the 14th century.
In 1385, a large French force arrived at the port of Leith outside Edinburgh to support the Scots. The army mustered here at the castle. Could our man have been part of this expedition?
Here we have an example of muster rolls for the 1385 campaign, where we get a sense of the type of men who were coming. So there's lists here of squires, and there's some 3,000 names here of the men who came over.
Not only is every soldier listed, but the route they took is well documented.
So here they are coming into Leith, which is the port of Leith in Edinburgh, basically. As you can see, they head south into the Anglo-Scottish borders. It's quite far from Stirling. They're not heading north into sort of central Scotland. They're coming into the borders area. It's pretty clear they don't go to Stirling.
The old alliance meant a French military presence in Scotland in the 14th century, but there's no evidence for a French fighting man's burial at Stirling. It's a dead end. It leaves one remaining possibility for Xanthi's research. Our knight was English. Meanwhile, the two Carolines are making good progress. Based on the bone scans, Caroline Needham is starting to reconstruct the knight's body.
I've got the measurements that we took of the bones, so from those I've made a life-size model on here, so
Okay.
I'll just open him for you. And then if you'd like to see the skin, I'll just turn that on. I'll make it see-through to begin with.
So this is doing nothing to suggest that he isn't a rugby player, is it?
Not really, no.
So let's just see the finished skin, because he's looking very big upper body, very short and squat legs.
Absolutely.
It's great.
That's the finished man.
Yeah. Yeah, he looks great. Looks fantastic. I really like him. Yeah, we've certainly got the body for fighting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aw, I like him.
Yeah.
Xanthi has come to the National Archives to find out whether there's any surviving records of the English at Stirling Castle in the 14th century. The Holy Grail is to find a name for the knight, but it seems unlikely given he died over 600 years ago. She's meeting archivist Jessica Lutkin, who has uncovered some surprising documents.
Okay, so what have you got?
Okay, we have some petitions.
Petitions?
Petitions.
Okay.
That date around the time of the wars in Scotland, so Bannockburn, etc.
Yeah.
So this is a direct petition to the King and his council and Parliament.
A request?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I can't read that.
This is Anglo-Norman French, so it's
Okay,
it's
good,
franglais. It's quite easy to understand.
Okay.
The request refers to an Englishman, William de Mouchon, who was captured at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314 and held for ransom. Hostage-taking, a common tool in medieval power play, often involved keeping VIPs under house arrest until deals were struck.
So I was hoping that this would be somebody who was
it could
killed.
be our man.
Yes,
Ooh,
it could be our
okay.
man. The unfortunate thing is his son and heir was swapped as a hostage for his
Right,
father.
okay.
And so William did not die at Stirling Castle.
Right.
So the first document is a red herring. William de Mouchon didn't die a hostage at Stirling Castle. So if our knight was English, maybe he died during one of the many English occupations of the castle. Jessica has unearthed another, even more extraordinary document.
This is the last of our potentials.
Exciting.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is an account of Stirling Castle.
Oh.
When it was held by the English. And so everything was accounted for. So all the expenses of the castle and who was at the castle.
We have names of everyone at the castle?
We have names of everybody at the castle.
You look excited now.
I am excited. I did not expect to find this kind of document with all these details on it. This is a real treat.
Right.
And this account is dated 1340, 1341.
Right, OK.
OK, and so you have all the list of the names. So you have knights at the top, and these are all men-at-arms.
Right, so these are all the people at the castle?
Yes. And what I want to show you is this name here.
Oh.
Sir John Distri.
Oh, OK.
Does that word ring a bell?
I can't read that word.
That says obit.
Oh, he's dead.
He's dead. And he died at Stirling Castle on the 10th of October. And the year is 1341.
Oh, that is fantastic.
It's an extraordinary discovery, which supports the carbon-14 dating of our man's bones. The following year, 1342, the Scottish reclaimed the castle, so could this English knight who died there be our man?
You can see at the end of his name, Miles, which is knight, so he was a senior member of the garrison.
So he's a really important person, so
yeah.
he could have been important enough to be buried within the castle itself?
Quite possibly, yes.
And at this time, would the castle have been under siege, the Scottish, if the English were holding it?
It wasn't under siege at this point. The siege of Stirling, when the Scots won the castle back, started in 1342. However, there still would have been a few skirmishes.
Yeah.
It was a very unsettled time, which is why you had such an extensive garrison there.
So this could really be our guy,
That is a
couldn't it?
potential name, yes.
Is that our boy?
So yes, so we have John Distri, who died at the castle. We don't know how he died.
Yeah.
We don't know what age he was when he died. And of course it doesn't confirm that he was buried at the castle.
No.
But I think this is one of the best possible examples of the kind of scenario you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I just never expected it. I never expected to find a potential name. I can't believe it, actually.
I have to admit, it was a big surprise to me as well.
I mean, for me, this is the ultimate, isn't it? Finding a name is the kind of ultimate aim of what we're doing. But I didn't expect it.
No, neither did I.
And if you're surprised, it
Yes.
shows just how exciting that really is.
Yes, it is quite extraordinary.
So John Distri, that may be our boy. Honestly, I think what I just learned is absolutely thrilling. It's so exciting that we've found a potential name and it could genuinely be our knight. And I just never expected that in a million years, that we'd actually get a name from, you know, the 1300s. It's just amazing. Fantastic. I think the team are going to be thrilled when I tell them.
Jessica's further research on the Distri family seems to suggest that the family line has died out. Sadly, the woman who was buried with Sir John will probably never be known. In the 14th century, women weren't usually deemed important enough to be documented. It's the final team meeting. Using forensic investigation and historical research, the team has established that our Stirling man was a powerful, battle-scarred knight. And despite the fact that he was buried in a Scottish castle, he was probably English and may have died from an arrow wound whilst fighting the Scots. Now, over 650 years after his death, the team is about to give him back his face and a possible name.
So I have to bring over this list. Oh yes, I've got some rather interesting news. I have.
Good. Let's hear it. Good.
Right, OK. We don't have any evidence to say there were any French burials at Stirling. So we have to return to the question of whether he was in fact English. Now, there's one particular scenario and one particular individual in that scenario which fits everything. So, during the 1330s to 1340s, it's documented the English actually held Stirling Castle for 10 years. But we have actually got a list of all of the people who were there as fighting men. And it's quite exciting because this actually indicates that the person third down died during this time at the castle. His name is Sir John Distri.
It's really quite an incredible result.
It's big.
Because all we had was
It's a great
all we
result.
had was a bit of a scar, and we had a bit of well-developed, a bit of beefcake, quite frankly, was what we had.
So now we know circumstances and
Yeah.
why he's there.
Everything fit.
And it's the capability of having those historical documents that suddenly give you a window that the science doesn't give you, which is
Yeah.
getting to the name. And I
Yeah.
think the history's really shored this
But
up.
virtually without the science, you wouldn't even have a starting point there to look.
Yes, it's the alliance.
Yeah.
It's the alliance between the
Yeah.
two. And that's fantastic to have from so far back in time a document that gives you a name.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, do we want to see what he looks like?
Yes, we do.
Obviously, we don't know details
or
of
hair.
skin colour and eye colour and
No,
hair
but I mean,
colour.
that looks-
We've estimated as a best guess based on the period of time and where we think he came from.
Go on, let's have a look.
Here we go.
Oh,
There we go.
okay. Oh, he looks like a footballer.
Well, rugby
No,
player.
rugby player. I actually see he's got more like a rugby player.
Nice scar.
So John Distri. Yeah. John. This is John.
Sir John.
Sir John.
Very
And,
nice. That looks very good.
Yeah.
The next thing we've got is that we've taken this, and with the information that we have from the skeleton, Caroline
Oh,
has
you did
produced a full body.
Look at the muscle there.
Oh,
Nice.
Fantastic. That is really very special. Very beautifully done. Beautifully done. That's
nice
really
job, Caroline.
Thank you.
Well done.
For Sue, the story of the Sterling cold case was always in his bones. His muscles carved out their own signature. They told the team he wasn't just a soldier, he was an English knight. And now, for the first time since his death over 600 years ago, the team have given him back his identity.
When you start with something that in some respects was less than optimal, and we really didn't know where we were going to go with this. He's a very interesting skeleton, but the chances of any historical case to at least get it back to a possible name is not something we ever anticipated we would be able to do. So this has gone much further than we could ever have predicted. Absolutely unexpected. And probably as far as we can go on this, the case is closed.
With the knight's forensic journey now over, he has returned to Historic Scotland's store in Edinburgh. He left an enigma. He's coming back with a possible name. Britain's finest unit for forensic investigation has a brand new mission. Now, for the first time, they'll turn their skills to investigate bodies from the long, distant past. They'll open new windows on history as they strive to put a face on some extraordinary human remains.